So I've got my talk prepared, but then I found something much more exciting on the lectern. So what I thought we'd start off with is start off with hands up. Who's good? Hands up. Who's there? Ooh, fewer hands. Some people put their hands up twice. We'll see if that changes by the end of the evening. So, just I'd introduce a random element. We've been looking at, you've been looking at the system of practice and spiritual death, stories to do with spiritual death and spiritual rebirth. And I'm going to look at a story this evening that's from the Digha Nikaya. The Digha Nikaya means the long discourses. I wrote it up, and then I just got bored and started writing up other names, but there we go, Digha Nikaya, the Buddha. The Digha Nikaya, the long discourses of the Buddha, they're the word of the reported word of the Buddha, but they're of a rather more fantastical nature. So there's something that's quite good if you're getting a little bit literal, a little bit dry, and you want to read something about the Buddhist tradition that is just completely wacky. And they're sort of stories within stories within stories, a lot of them. And they represent a kind of more, let's say, a wider universe. And a bit like I live in Wales now, and it's known as a thin place, where the sort of doorway between the mystical, magical world, the fairy world, and the everyday human world is quite thin. You get to meet water sprites and dragons and fairies in Wales. And you get to meet all sorts of things in the Digha Nikaya. So this story was actually told originally to the heaven of the 33 gods by the great god Brahma. And it was told to the Buddha by one of the gods in the 33 god realm. I don't know if that just means there's 33 gods, because when you read it, there seems to be a lot more than that. But anyway, one of those gods goes to the Buddha and repeats it to him. So let me tell you how it comes about. In the heaven of the 33 gods, they'd been rejoicing in the qualities of the Buddha and the majesty of the Dharma. And something happens when the gods start to rejoice in merits. And they quite often do this in the Buddhist tradition. They start to rejoice in maybe the Buddha, maybe some of the followers of the Buddha. And as they do so, they start to shine, they start to glow, they start to radiate beams of different light. So they're all sort of together, radiating light, rejoicing in merits, pleased, happy, overjoyed, filled with delight. And then a kind of magical thing happens, a very mysterious thing. There's a lot of light going on, there's a lot of rainbow light going on, and then there's even more light. Because a great radiance was seen that lit up the heavenly realm, outshining the light of the gods. And this is the great god Brahma, the top dog, the top god, who appears at this point to outshine the light of the small gods and take part in the rejoicing. So he just starts to kind of join in, rejoicing in the Buddha. And he wants to tell them a story to illustrate just how long the Buddha has been mighty in wisdom. So, a story within a story. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, was a great steward called Jotipala. And Jotipala successfully looked after the affairs of not only one king, but 7 kings of India. And not only did he look after the affairs of these 7 kings of India, he also taught mantras to 7 distinguished Brahmins and 700 advanced disciples. So, he's got a lot of influence going on. And not only this, but it said he had 40 wives of equal rank. So he's a very lucky man. He was popular, he was well loved, he was a beloved, dear and faithful friend. A beloved, dear and faithful husband to all 40 of his wives. And he saved the kingdoms from neglect and war, he restored harmony, he managed the affairs of the kingdoms very well, and lots of people relied on him. And he created harmony and prosperity throughout India. And he was so popular that reports were spread that the great steward Jotipala can see Brahma with his own eyes, see him face to face, and consults with Brahma. So you can imagine this is what people are thinking, well, like, how does he know so much? How does he have time to do it all? You know, manage the affairs of 7 kingdoms, 700 pupils, 7 Brahmins, 40 wives. He seemed to do it all so well, with such ease. Well, maybe it's because he's talking to Brahma every night, talking to the great god Brahma. So that's what the rumour started about Jotipala. He can see Brahma with his own eyes, he can see him face to face, and he consults with him and gets his advice from Brahma. But Jotipala knew it wasn't true. He knew it wasn't true, and the rumour was getting more and more widespread. But he had heard a story once. When he was a small boy, he'd heard a story. He'd heard it told that if you went on a solitary retreat for 4 months, the 4 months of the rainy season, and if you meditated on love and compassion, you would see Brahma with your own eyes. So he asked permission of the kings, he asked permission of the Brahmins, he asked permission of his 700 pupils, and he asked permission of his 40 wives, and he went to a wild place outside the city, and he started to meditate. So let's just stop and take a little look so far in the story of what this might mean. So Jotipala is a worldly, he's a very successful worldly man. He's successful in that worldly sense. He advises kings. He's got a lot of money, a lot of wealth. He's got a lot of wives. He's got a lot of disciples. And this isn't someone you'd immediately think would be that interested in a path of higher wisdom. It's not something that you'd think would be particularly interested maybe in the Dharma. There's no sort of sense of existential longing with Jotipala. There's none of this kind of feeling that he's under the burden of existence. There's no sort of sense in him that maybe it's not enough, or maybe he needs another direction. He hasn't got that kind of sad, wistful look in his eyes. The world is working out very well for Jotipala, and he's enjoying himself. He's a happy, healthy human being. But sometimes these are the people who make the best disciples, apparently. And he does have some qualities that are essential to a higher life. He has the qualities of honesty and straightforwardness. He's got the qualities of curiosity about life and what is possible with life. So people think that he can see Brahma. People think he can see a great God. People think basically he's got a big, big vision. He can see the greatest of all gods with his own eyes. They think that he can see Brahma face to face and that he consults with Brahma. So he decides that instead of kind of going around and squashing all the rumours, saying, no, I'm just a pathetic, miserable, stupid person, really. I can't see anyone. I just, I'm really nothing. I just, don't pay any attention to me. Instead of all that kind of goings on, he decides that he wants to live up to their expectations. He wants to grow to meet the expectations that people have of him. And it reminds me very much of one of Sangharajta's teachers called Dado Rinpoche. So Dado Rinpoche was recognised as a child, as a reincarnation of another famous Lama, another famous Buddhist practitioner in Tibet. And he says of himself, well, I have no recollection of that. I never had any recollection that I was a reborn great Lama, that I was a great person. But everyone else seemed to remember it, and everyone else seemed to think I was a great person, so I thought I'd better just live up to their expectations. I better actually just study hard and meditate and see if I could be that person for them. So he decided to act as if. He decided to act as if he was a famous tulku, as they're called. And I think in a way this is quite interesting because it goes against a certain attitude that we can have, particularly in Britain, I think. It goes against a particular attitude of fear of responsibility, fear of shining out, fear of our own brilliance. So Jotipala could have run around, telling everyone that he was a miserable worm and not to expect too much of him, and really he didn't know what he was talking about, and who was he anyway? He was just some stupid bloke. He could have done that. He could have squashed all the rumours and tried to hide. But actually, he decided that he would grow to fit the expectations. He wouldn't let the people down who thought so much of him. And, you know, maybe we could take some of this attitude. Maybe if someone rejoices in us, maybe if someone believes in us, maybe if someone thinks the best of us, and we don't feel that big, well, instead of just bringing ourselves down and making ourselves smaller and little, maybe instead of belittling ourselves, we could try and grow to meet that expectation. So that's what Jotipala does. He's not afraid of his own brilliance. He's quite a straightforward, curious kind of man, and he decides to stand up to the challenge. And he doesn't just decide to do that, he also sets up conditions so that he can grow. He goes on retreat. He puts himself in conditions that are most likely to help him grow, most likely to lead him towards seeing Brahma face to face. And in a way, that's another lesson that we can take from Jotipala, that actually it's not just about deciding I'm going to be a bigger person. It's actually about putting yourself in conditions where that's likely to happen. I have heard, and it might be an apocryphal story, but that's never stopped a good story, so I thought I'd say that apparently there was once a study group here in Sheffield, and people were saying how hard they found meditation, and you know, how difficult it was, and they couldn't really get on with it so well. And the study leader said, well, have you ever been on retreat? And none of them had ever been on retreat. So he said, well, in a way you haven't given meditation a chance. So in a way we could take something from that if we want to give the Dharma a chance, if we want to give meditation a chance, if we want to give our own growth a chance, well, we need to put ourselves in good conditions where that's likely to happen. So Jotipala knows he won't be able to see Brahma face to face just like that in the midst of his ordinary life, with obviously a very demanding job and home life. Goodness only knows what having 40 lives like. But he decides he's not going to be able to see Brahma face to face just like that. He'll go on retreat. He goes to the wild places outside the boundaries of the city, and he sets up good conditions for himself. And that's where we've left Jotipala. So Jotipala is in a solitary retreat, doing the Metta Bhavana, doing meditation, which is sometimes called Karana Bhavana, or meditation on compassion as well. So he's there for 4 months. He's given it a good old stint. The rains have appeared. They've squashed everything in water. And the rains have subsided. It's the end of the rainy season retreat, but still he's come no nearer to seeing Brahma face to face. He's reaped only weariness and dissatisfaction. And at that point, on the brink of despair, Jotipala looks up and sees with his own eyes, face to face, Brahma, blazing with a light greater than the light of all the gods together. And Jotipala was afraid. He trembled and his hair stood on end. There was Brahma, the person he'd been, or God that he'd been waiting to see. And it said that he made Brahma the customary offerings, which Brahma accepts. And Brahma asks him, well, what do you wish for? Do you wish for happiness in the future or happiness right now? So Jotipala knew that actually he had everything he needed in his life. He had a good job, he had respect, he had status, he had praise, he had money, he had pupils, he had wives, and he knew how to get what he wanted in life. In a way that was sorted. This life is pretty much sorted. But what about the future? So he asked Brahma, how can mortals reach the deathless Brahma world? And Brahma replied, that man who spurns all possessive thoughts, one-pointed, concentrated, filled with compassion, free from stench, free from lust, established thus and training thus, can mortals reach the deathless Brahma world. So Jotipala sets up the conditions for seeing Brahma face to face, and he has an expectation of what will happen. But it doesn't quite go according to plan. Jotipala has tried very, very sincerely and tried very hard to fulfill the expectations of others, to see Brahma face to face, and he just comes to a dead end. He comes to despair. He reaps weariness and disappointment. And actually that experience that Jotipala has at that point is an experience that's common to all practitioners of mystical traditions. There's a lovely line from a Sufi poet called Hafiz, who says, "For love seemed easy at first, but then grew difficult." And St. John, who was a Christian mystic, talks about the dark night of the soul, where you sacrifice everything, you devote everything in your life to the love of God, but are lost in darkness, and God's love is nowhere to be found. So this is a very, very real experience that a lot of people go to at some point in their spiritual progress. And I think we have it at different levels all the time. In a way, we can look at it as an example of spiritual death. And what happens is we're going along practicing in a particular way, which suddenly stops working. So for example, the Metta Bhavana, maybe you've gone to your beginner's course and you've got a particular way of working with the Metta Bhavana. Perhaps you imagine bringing people into your favourite sort of special place. And for a while that kind of works out quite well. You're there, you invite them in, I don't know where your special place is, it's on a cliff somewhere, and you sit there and you have a cup of tea and a picnic, and there's a lot of love flowing, it's very positive, it's all great. You keep doing that, and then one day you go into a meditation session, go and have your picnic, get up, it just seems a bit wooden or something. And then you think, I thought I could do the Metta Bhavana, and now it just doesn't seem to work. And maybe you go and do your mindfulness breathing while you've got particular things, you imagine yourself to be in the blue sky and big eagle's wings, whatever it is, you use all the techniques that you've got, and imagining sitting on a cave or piper or whatever it is you use. And you've got all these kind of techniques set up for yourself, and you sit down and you think, well, I know where I'm going with this. Here I am, meditation. And it's just like, you even having trouble remembering to breathe. And it just seems a bit like clunky or something, or you're just in the right eagle's wings, and then what's happening with eagle's wings? Nothing. They just seem like you're trying to contrive something. So I think all the time this is what's happening. We have a particular approach perhaps to meditation, perhaps to spiritual life in general, and it just stops working in quite the same way. And you stop and you turn around and you wonder if you've actually moved at all from where you started. You start to wonder, well, have I progressed? I thought I could do the Metta Bhavana. I thought I could do the mindfulness breathing, but actually maybe I can't. I thought I understood Introducing Buddhism by Chris Pauling. I'm trying to plug some books here. Is there anything else you need to sell? No, but I fall apart. You thought you read it, you thought you understood it, you go back to it, and then you just think, yeah, I know I had some sort of really deep insight at this point, but I can't quite remember what it was. And actually, if that happens to you at any point, well, that's a really, really good thing. It's actually a really good thing, because you are progressing, but progression doesn't necessarily look like you want it to look. What we're left with is what Arloka calls a path of debris. Abandoned ideas, abandoned approaches, abandoned old way of doing things. So the brilliant quote from Arloka where he says, "In 1976, I formally committed myself to a course of action, which is ordination, about which I had a whole jumble of ideas. None of these have really turned out to be of much use, except their gradual abandonment has provided a path of debris, offering the consolation that I have actually moved from where I started. In short, the practice of the Dharma, or my attempted practice at least, has not turned out to be remotely what I thought it might be like. I'm pleased to say." What a disaster. What a disaster if the spiritual life looked like you expect it to be at the beginning. What a disaster if your limited imagination came up with the best you could be. I know what my imagination is like. My imagination is limited to this sort of, you know, subtle variations of greed, hatred and delusion. If my actual spiritual progress ended up looking what I imagine it to be, I'm absolutely scuppered, and I might as well do something different right now. So it's brilliant, you know, when you get to this point in Metta Bhavana, or mindfulness of breathing, or spiritual life in general, and actually just think, oh, it's just not working anymore. And all the things that I used to do just don't seem to work anymore. Well, rejoice. Rejoice, because what's happening at that moment is you're starting to abandon your old way of seeing things, your old ideas, your old practices, and you're ready to move into something new. And this path of debris has the same characteristic. The path of debris is united because what you're leaving behind is a fixed idea of self, a fixed idea of who you could be. This is me, this is the way I go about things, this is the limitations of my experience. My experience is like this and no further. And what you try and do then, if you've got this very fixed idea about yourself, you know, I like this, I don't like that, I think like this, I don't think like that, I agree with this, I don't agree with that, I'm really good at study, but I'm really rubbish at meditation, or I'm really, really good at meditation, I'm really rubbish at study, I'll never be able to understand, You know, you've got this whole sort of framework, you know, of what my consciousness will be like. And actually the path of debris is when you just let bits of that idea of yourself go, that fixed, separate selfhood. And you stop trying to arrange the Dharma into your existing being. You know, you've got a particular idea about yourself. Let's say you've got the particular idea of yourself, you're not very intellectual. So when you come across the Dharma, and there's some books, you know, and we're talking about ancient texts here, some of them are like 2,000 years old. So you're going to look at all these ancient texts and you're going to think, oh, I'm not going to have anything to do that. I'm not intellectual. I can't read these books and stuff like that. You know, that's not me. Well, in a way, you've cut yourself off from a whole landscape, a whole beautiful kind of treasure that you could have taken part in. You've blocked yourself off from it. And you've tried to make the Dharma into something who you are already. Well, you know, that stuff's not important. That kind of intellectual stuff is not important. Where it's really at is meditation. So in a way, you've just rearranged, you've just decided what's important in the Dharma and what isn't important. And you've tried to rearrange the Dharma to suit yourself. Well, you know, and I'm not very good at doing the Metta Bhavana, I'm really good at doing the mindfulness of breathing. So the Metta Bhavana is not that important either. What's really important is the mindfulness of breathing. Well, in a way, at some point, you're going to have to let that go. You're going to have to see, well, actually, you could be much bigger than you thought you could be. That actually, maybe even you could get on with the Metta Bhavana. Even you could get on with the sutras and the suttas and all that wealth of stories and imagination that's contained in the Buddhist texts. So Jotipala has an idea of himself. He's got a fixed idea of himself. He's got an idea that he's successful, that if he applies to himself, he's used to getting what he wants. If he applies himself to seeing Brahma, just like anything else, he's just going to go and see Brahma face to face. I've been told I need to meditate on the Metta Bhavana for 4 months, then I'll see Brahma face to face, so I'm going to go on a solitary retreat, I'm going to meditate on the Metta Bhavana for 4 months, and I'm going to see Brahma face to face. And when Brahma comes, he will look like this, and he will do this, and he will say this to me. And, you know, and then I'll go back and I'm like, hey, yeah, I can see Brahma face to face. You know, that's what his kind of landscape is, that he's just decided he's got a very, you know, an idea about what spiritual progress will look like. And in a way, we've all got these ideas. We've all got these ideas about the spiritual life. We can't really avoid having ideas like that about spiritual life. The only thing we can do is that when it stops working, we relax. When things stop working, when a particular approach stops working, we relax. We open ourselves to the mystery. We at least have a sense of humour about the fact that we may not know everything. And the spiritual life might look a little bit different than we thought it would. And this, in a way, is part of spiritual receptivity. Spiritual receptivity is being open to a natural unfoldment of your being, and not fixing it down what that's going to look like and who you're going to be. It's being open and alive to the mystery. And something utterly different does happen to Jotipala. In a blaze of light, Brahma appears, and Jotipala is afraid. I think that's very significant in this text, that Jotipala is afraid. His hair stands on end. And I imagine, I've imagined quite a lot of this story in the way of what that would actually be like. And what I imagine with Jotipala is that he's afraid because he's no longer in control. And maybe this is a man who's not used to being afraid. He's a very capable, successful man. He's not used to being afraid. He's not used to the unexpected happening. And he's no longer in control. He's no longer successful and confident, but he's actually frightened. His whole order, his whole world order, his whole idea of himself is compromised. And he doesn't know what's going to happen next. How will he change? Who will he be? What will change? His construction of the world and who he is shattered at that moment when Brahma appears. And it's bigger than his, and he doesn't know what to do next. There's a Japanese teacher who's got a lovely quote in a similar way to this. He says, "Never ask your teachers to explain, but when your activity of mind is exhausted and your capacity for feeling comes to a dead end, if something should take place, not unlike the cat springing up upon the mouse, or the mother hen hatching her eggs, then a great flash of livingness surges up. This is the moment when the phoenix escapes from the golden net, and when the crane breaks the bars of its cage." So I think this is what happens to Jotipala. His activity of mind is exhausted, and his capacity for feeling comes to a dead end. And a great flash of livingness surges up, and the phoenix escapes from the golden net, and the crane breaks the bars of its cage. And that's a very unnerving experience. So Jotipala has come to the end of his worldly success. His self-effort, his old idea of himself, has come to a dead end. And the old, confident, worldly Jotipala cannot see Brahma, but the broken open Jotipala can. So Brahma appears, and who is Brahma? Well, Brahma literally means, if you look it up in the dictionary, it literally means highest, best, noble, sublime, ideal, holy, sacred, divine in the sense of embodying highest and most noble qualities. So Brahma originally is envisaged as one of the old Indian gods, and he's often depicted as a sort of wise old man, wise old man with a big beard. Quite familiar, something, But really what he is he's an embodiment of the highest spiritual qualities. He's not enlightened, he's not as high as the Buddha, but he's the highest that mundane consciousness can reach. He is an embodiment of what's highest, noble, sublime, holy. And the highest that mundane consciousness can reach. So in the depths of despair, something stirs within Jotipala, or perhaps it's more accurate to say something stirs without Jotipala. In the language of myth, it doesn't really matter how you look at it. But Jotipala has a vision of a higher state of consciousness, higher than his old state of consciousness. It's not an ordinary state of consciousness. And because it's not an ordinary state of consciousness, it's not anything that he's experienced before, he experiences it as coming from outside of himself. So this is something that's also common in mystical traditions. When we come to our old ways of being, when we come to the old ways of doing things, our old ideas about who we are, we feel taken over by something from outside of ourselves. Whether it is outside of yourself or not is irrelevant in this point. at this point. What it really is that you've had an old idea of what your consciousness is capable of, and when something bigger than that arises, you feel as if it's coming from outside of yourself, because it's not within your normal understanding of what your mind is capable of. So yes, so it's a sort of warning really. If you feel yourself, something coming into your consciousness in a blaze of light, it's a good thing. And in a way, maybe this is something to do with spiritual death and rebirth. The old you, your old approach to life dies, something new comes in. Old habits must die, something else must emerge that is beyond normal consciousness, is beyond what we normally imagine that we're capable of. So Brahma appears and gives Jotipala a choice. He says you can have bliss in this life or the next. The word is sukha, happiness or bliss. He says you can have bliss in this life or the future. It's a bit like one of those experiments, you know, when they offer kids, they say you can have one sweet now, or you can wait 10 minutes and we'll give you 2 sweets. It's a bit like that, only much bigger and involving more light. So, yeah, Jotipala's offered these sweets. Which one do you think? And Jotipala says, well, actually, I've got everything I need for now, but he knows he can't keep it. Maybe Jotipala imagines himself as an old man. Maybe he imagines himself as an old man on his deathbed. Maybe he realises that when he dies, he can't take those 7 kingdoms or the 7 Brahmins or the 700 pupils or the 40 wives with him. He can't take his wealth and riches. What will they mean at that point? Life is king. Kingdoms rise and fall. Old age creeps up. And you can't take wives or pupils or jobs into your own death. So maybe he thinks about these things and he chooses the future. He asks how to reach the Brahma world. And in a way we could look at this as saying, well, it's the best world, the highest world, the divine world. And Brahma answers him something quite interesting. He says one reaches the Brahma world by giving up all possessive thoughts. And if you look this up in Pali, it makes it quite clear that what it's talking about is possessive thoughts mean thoughts that are based on a fixed, separate self-identity, self which is opposed to others. You enter the Brahma world by giving up all thoughts of me and mine. So in more sort of simpler language, in other words, one reaches the highest by giving up selfishness and constant self-referencing. So Sangha Night has actually done a little kind of exposition of this story. And he says that the practice that one undertakes at this point is the practice of spiritual friendship. This is the practice that really helps us work with seeing ourselves as fixed and separate and in opposition to others. So the training one has to undertake is to be a friend to others, because in friendship you're not only concerned with your own welfare, but you're also concerned with the welfare of your friend. You relate to your friend on the basis of metta, of love, and not on power. And through friendship, we learn out of affection for our friend to go beyond our own sort of constant self-referencing, or what do I want to do? And, you know, that kind of state of mind of which I am the centre of the universe, and my thoughts and feelings take priority over everyone else's. That's what possessive thoughts are. It's me and mine, my self-identity, my thoughts, my feelings take priority over the whole world. That's a possessive thought. And the weird thing is that we all do it. So we all think our thoughts and feelings take priority over everyone else. And the only practice that's really going to work to undermine this is spiritual friendship. When out of affection, we take that leap from me, my own thoughts, my own feelings are the best and most important, and actually go and towards other people and recognise that they also have thoughts and feelings, and their thoughts and feelings are equally as important to yours. So spiritual friendship is the only practice that's really going to work on this. going beyond our own selfish desires. And that whole kind of dynamic where we place ourselves in opposition to others and we want to close down, withdraw and isolate ourselves. Actually, we start to consider in spiritual friendship what the effect of our behaviour is on other people. Reginald Ray talks a lot about reversing the normal logic of the ego. And I think this is what spiritual friendship does for us. It reverses the normal logic of the ego. And the normal logic of the ego says, me first. But friendship, you can't quite do that. You know, you want to withdraw, you want to isolate yourself, you want to have a little strop and go up to your bedroom and close the door. But with spiritual friendship, you can't. Well, with friendship, you can't. Because you realise that if you do that, you're actually going to have an effect on someone else. Someone else actually cares about you. So spiritual friendship is the main practice for going against this sense of separateness, isolation, this fixed sense of self that prioritises our own thoughts and feelings over anyone else. In one of the other discourses of the Buddha, there's a group of friends who live together and they say, why should I not set aside what I wish to do and do what they want to do? Well, if you can undertake that practice, the old world is shattered. The old world of me and mine and constant self-referencing, the possessive thoughts, that whole self-drama that we undertake that makes us actually quite miserable is shattered. And that is the way to the noble world. And it's interesting that Brahma links giving up possessive thoughts with meditation. So the next step is meditation. On the basis of giving up that kind of tyranny of constant self-referencing, the tyranny of a fixed, separate self-view, we are able to respond not only to other people, but also to a higher state of consciousness. Perhaps I was thinking about this, well, what's the link between giving up possessive thoughts and being able to meditate? And I suppose it's something, again, about this idea that if we've got a very fixed sense of ourselves, we've got a very fixed sense of how far our consciousness can go. You know, what the limitations of me and my consciousness are. And when that starts to soften, we can actually, it's almost like it gives us more room for our consciousness to expand. We relax, we open up, something different can emerge. Something much more exciting and dynamic can emerge in our consciousness. And we're more receptive to other people. There's that wonderful moment in spiritual life where you just realise you're wrong. It's so great. Oh, what a pity if I was right all the time. And you realise you're wrong about yourself. You've got a wrong idea of what you're capable of, but you're also wrong about other people. And you know, you've got other people all sewn up, you know what they're like, well, they're like this and this and this. You've got them in a little box, and you've decided you either like them or you don't like them. Well, whatever. Because what happens is, maybe you go to Sangha Night, maybe you go on a day retreat or a study event, and you sit down next to them, and maybe you don't like them, and you've got it all sewn up why you don't like them, and they're this kind of person, and then you sit down next to them, and then you have a chat with them, and you realise you're totally wrong. You know, that actually you didn't understand anything about them. That actually they're much, much more exciting than you. Or that thing where you're struggling with someone and you're finding it really difficult to communicate with someone, and then someone you don't like comes into the tea room and they're incredibly kind. And they've done something that you just weren't able to do. And you realise that actually all those opinions about this person just fall down in a big heap on the floor. So that's what this kind of thing is talking about. It's the whole old idea of oneself, what one is capable of. Whole idea about other people just completely collapses. And you're more able to give rise to something much more exciting. Something much more exciting can come in. And what Brahma goes on to say is that one should train in freeing ourselves from stench. Luckily, he actually explains this a little bit later. He says that one should wash more often. No, it doesn't say much. He says that actually stench means negative emotion and unethical behaviour. Anger, lying, fraud, avarice, pride, jealousy, doubt, harming others, ignorance. All of these leave a loathsome stench that cuts you off from the noble life. And I quite like this because I think a lot of Buddhist texts, they talk about ethics as an aesthetic practice. It's almost as if actions of body, speech and mind give off a sort of perfume. Some of us will know the lines from the Dhammapada. The fragrance of the perfect life, sweeter than incense, spreads in all directions throughout the world. And likewise, unethical actions of body, speech and mind smell bad. They make the gods recoil, apparently. They're disgusting. And maybe you've had an experience of this that, you're all sitting round and you say something a bit harsh. And what it's basically like is you just farted and done a really smelly fart right in the middle of the tea room. And then everyone kind of goes, oh. So that's what unethical behaviour is like. It's like a big fart. And really it's just better not to do it. Don't fart in the tea room. Be nice to people. Yeah. And likewise, ethical actions smell sweetly. So they're like, sticking incense in the tea room, or really nice, good quality incense. It's pleasant to be around. And sometimes you'll experience this with people who have very kind speech or very, delightful speech. And actually being around them is a very pleasant aesthetic experience. It's like going into a room full of flowers. And apparently, actually, you know when the gods have been there because the room smells of flowers. So sometimes you might have had the experience, or possibly not, but anyway, you might have had the experience of, at the end of meditation, you can smell a very, very strong smell of flowers. Anyone had that? It's not come from the incense. I have got a very, very active imagination. But apparently if you smell that smell of flowers, it means the gods have come there, which means that actually you're in really positive mental states, because the gods are very sensitive to these things. So we have our practice. We have our practice for living in the noble world, and the practice is friendship, meditation, the metta-bhavana, it's mentioned specifically the metta-bhavana, and ethics. Cultivating positive emotion, leaving behind our fixed, separate sense of self. And if we do this, we too will see Brahma face to face. So Jotipala has his advice and he goes back home, but he is changed. He's not the same man that he was before. And he no longer wants to settle back into his home with his job and his friends and his pupils and his wives. He can't live the old life anymore. And he says why. He says it is hard to leave behind negative emotions. It is hard to leave behind negative states of mind that focus on me and mine, while still living a normal life. And he resolves to live the homeless life. So first of all, he goes to the kings, and he says to the kings, I'd like you to find another minister to manage your affairs. And they beg him to stay. They say, we'll give you whatever you want. We'll give you power. We'll give you a whole army to protect you. We'll give you money. We'll give you women. We'll give you anything you want. And he says, no, it is hard to leave behind negative emotions, living an ordinary life. I want to live the homeless life. So he goes to the 7 Brahmins and his 700 pupils, and he asks them to find a new teacher. And they beg him to stay. They say, well, you can have all the power you want, all the respect that you want. We'll give you all the profit that you want. Apparently it's quite a lucrative business being a Brahmin. And you get a lot of status. They say, look, you're a Brahmin, you'll get loads of money, you'll get loads of status, you'll give you even more pupils, even more respect. People will be queuing up just to touch you. And he says, no, it's hard to leave behind negative emotions in an ordinary life. I've resolved to live the homeless life. And he goes to his wives and he says to them, look, all of you, go back to your family and find a new husband. And they beg him to stay. They say, no, but you're the only husband we want. We don't want to go back home and find another husband. And he speaks to all of them of cool. he speaks to the call of Brahma, Brahmin. He says, I called, he answered. I now can stay no more. And that call was leading him onwards, leading him away from his worldly cares. But the kings and the pupils and the Brahmins and the wives did not want him to slip away. They didn't want him to leave them. They didn't want to get on with an ordinary life without him. His choices had affected them quite deeply. And maybe they'd seen a change. Maybe they'd seen what it was really like to see someone who'd seen Brahma face to face. And his inspiration affected them. So they all said to him, wherever you go, we will follow. So they all went forth into the homeless life. 7 kings, 7 Brahmins, 700 pupils, 40 wives, along with several thousand Katyas, I don't really know who they are, several thousand Brahmins, several thousand householders, and even some harem women. So Jotipala wandered throughout India, apparently, with a rather large collection of different assorted people behind him in a huge retinue. And he went through the villages and the towns and the royal cities, followed by this rather enormous company. I don't know what they made of them all arriving looking for alms, but there we go. It said that wherever he went, he was loved and respected, and so were his followers. And he practiced the Mesabhavna, rejoicing in others, compassion, equanimity, and he taught those practices to others. And all his followers saw Brahma face to face. So the story ends with Jotipala on going back to the community. At the beginning of the story, Jotipala went on his own to meditate. He had a vision beyond his ordinary self, and he returned. He returned to gather a community. And this has echoes of the later Buddhist tradition of the Bodhisattva. And the Bodhisattva is someone who has seen through the false construction of me and mine and self and other, and fixed and separate selfhood. The Bodhisattva is someone for whom wisdom has arisen. And they cannot slide back into ordinary life. They cannot slide back into that ordinary sort of self-agenda. And it's said that at that moment when wisdom arises, compassion is expressed. Compassion arises. Love arises. Love arises for others. And the expression of wisdom becomes a dedication to gather a community. So that's what happens in the life of the Bodhisattva. When they see through the false construction of self as opposed to other, they have a desire, a longing, a compulsion to gather a community. To gather a community that can help and support each other in the spiritual life. So wisdom is always united with compassion, with love, with a going out to others. So I think sometimes in the West what we can do is we can think of wisdom as a cold thing, as insight. And there's a Western idea that you can just have insight, I just have my own insight, and then I just go back to my ordinary life, just a bit kind of cooler and a bit wiser, and people will take me a little bit more seriously, which would be nice. And then I just go in and, I just kind of slip into my ordinary life, but it's me just a bit wiser, and carry on with my ordinary job, and my ordinary responsibilities, and my ordinary family, just a bit better. And the Western view is that you don't really have to change anything, and life just carries on. And apparently, in a way, there's been a recent philosopher who's really, really anti-Western Buddhism, which makes a great read, actually. And he says, well, in a way, that whole view of insight is a perfect complement to Western capitalism. Because Western capitalism says it's all about me. It's all about me and my individual life, and I can just have insight. I'm just going to have insight on me. It's going to be like another possession, only just much cooler. So, I can have the ordinary house and car and whatever, and then I'll just have insight as well. And that's what Western Buddhism can sometimes do. It can be another way to just have another possession and still live quite an isolated, individualistic life. But this story shows something quite different. It shows the personal journey of the Bodhisattva. And it shows that spiritual practice will find expression in a dropping of me and mine, and a corresponding development of friendship, a corresponding development of metta, positive emotion, and a positive effect on those around you. So spiritual practice will find expression in the development of a Sangha. Spiritual friendship will not only change you, it will change your lifestyle, and it will change your relationship with others. And I think this is very important, because spiritual rebirth is not a personal thing. I don't know if I can say this emphatically enough. Spiritual rebirth is not about you being reborn. It's about coming into relationship with other people on a much more compassionate, more outgoing basis. And the way that this is expressed in the sutta is very beautiful. Jotipala talks about a call that comes from beyond his limited selfhood, that comes from beyond his old idea of himself and what he's capable of. He talks of a call, he talks of Brahma, the voice of Brahma that sings to him in the night, that takes him away from himself, takes him away from his old world, his mansion, his job, his wealth, his status. And this call calls him out into the streets and into the villages to spread love and compassion with everybody that he finds. It's actually a quality of the Dharma. A quality of the Dharma is ahipasika, which means the nature of personal invitation. And it's this kind of calling that calls us away from our ordinary self-preoccupations into a life that's much, much more mysterious, much bigger, much more beautiful. And when we hear that call, we're afraid. We're afraid because it's something we've never heard before, or maybe we've only heard it in our deepest dreams, in a silent moment in the middle of the night. And we know that if we follow that call, we will be changed. Not only will we be changed, fundamentally changed in ways that we could never have expected of ourselves, but we also know that our life will be changed, that we won't be able to just go back to the ordinary things. And we also know that our relationships with other people will be changed. So we decide to just ignore it, push it away, go back to the ordinary relationships, the ordinary lifestyle, the ordinary me and my own preoccupations with my feelings and my thoughts taking the central stage. But the Dharma invites us out. The still, soft call of the Dharma invites us out, away from our old lives and into the unknown. It invites us out from our kind of cage, our small house of self-preoccupation, and it calls us to wander through towns and villages, through streets and royal cities. And maybe, just maybe, we'll hear that call, and maybe we'll follow it. So there's a little ending to the story, which is that Buddha hears the story, and he acknowledges that Jotipala was indeed himself in a former life. But he said it wasn't the end. There is further to go. There's further to go than seeing Brahma face to face. He says there is the uncorrupted freedom of heart and mind, Nibbana, the uncorrupted freedom of heart and mind. So Jotipala sets up the conditions for a higher state of consciousness to emerge. It does emerge, and he is afraid. He dies to his old way of being. He dies to his sense of fixed and separate selfhood. He dies to his old life. And in dying, he is reborn in a positive relationship with other people. And it's not the old relationship of steward or husband or teacher, but he's reborn into relationship with other, which is about being a spiritual friend and gathering a community and spreading love and compassion to all he meets. And there is still